All right. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to WZ Coffee Before Class, which before was the coffee break, but same concept, same idea. So good to see everybody on this Friday morning. I'm going to give it a couple seconds before I get into it. I know some people will jump on afterwards and watch it at a time when they're actually probably awake, especially those on the West Coast. But hopefully, wherever you're calling in from, it is nicer than it is here. I'm in Chicago, and I woke up this morning and it said that the temperature was -3, and it feels like it's -17. So a little balmy here. But hopefully, it'll get into the mid-teens later today. That should be good. -27. Okay, John. Well, I shouldn't be complaining. That's fair. You understand the pain then. A humidifier in every room and depression for 6 months, right? So, all right. So let's get into the reason for the conversation today, and I'm gonna keep it relatively short, but I wanted to talk about a couple tips on just the impact of our demeanor as an interviewer, right? So things that we do that we may not necessarily pay attention to or recognize how it's being perceived, but it has a pretty long-standing impact outside of just the specific conversations that we're having. So the first thing I want to focus on, I'm going to do this kind of in two ways. The first is going to be on the impact of our demeanor during an interview, so on the subject, and then the second piece is going to be the impact of our demeanor on our peers and on our direct reports if you're in a supervisory position. So on a subject, so what we've noticed is that, and we've learned this by asking, right? By asking people after they've gone through an interview, by asking questions just to gauge kind of how the experience went for them. But what we learned is that when someone is being interviewed and they're telling the truth, so they're providing a truthful narrative, that if during that interview, if the interviewer does not believe what the subject is telling them, and this is Charles, who's just made an appearance, if the interviewer does not believe what the subject is telling them, even though the subject is being truthful, the subject with a pretty high degree of accuracy can tell at what point in the interview that the interviewer thinks they're lying, right? And this has a lot of really long-standing negative impacts to the success of the conversation. So what they tend to notice immediately, what the subject notices from the interviewer, if they think that the interviewer doesn't believe their story, is their whole demeanor starts to change. The interviewer's whole demeanor starts to shift towards being approachable, or from being approachable and empathetic towards being impatient and agitated. And little things tend to tip this off. The first one being the interviewee, the subject, tends to notice facial expressions change, right? So, and think about this: if you've ever been talking to somebody and you're telling them the truth, but they don't believe you, you can tell, even if they don't tell you that they think that you're lying, you can tell by their expression, because they're starting to look at you like, that's ridiculous. I get this all the time, and when I'm watching videos of me doing interviews, I see this in myself all the time, and I'm constantly trying to be aware of it. But it's this mentality of like, fix your face, right? I wear my emotions on my sleeve, and I wear them all over my face as well. And during an interview, if I look agitated or I look like I don't believe what that person is saying, it has immediate negative impacts to the relationship that I've already worked so hard to build with that subject. So facial expressions is a big one that we project onto the other person. Other things that they notice is just shift in tone of voice, right? Tone of voice being that instead of me being approachable and empathetic and patient in my line of questioning, I start to be very pointed. We start to become very frustrated and agitated towards the individual if we think what they're saying is not true, right? And all of these things have long-standing negative impacts, right? So whether it's facial expression, whether it's your tone of voice, whether it's your body language, it becomes more closed off, whatever. All of these things project onto the subject. And when the whole goal of an interview, and if you think about this, what is the goal of an interview? The goal of an interview, regardless, whether it's a subject, victim, or a witness, the goal of the interview is to get actionable information. And we need to get that information by allowing the individual to volunteer it to us. And we are strangers to them. And oftentimes it's a contentious situation where we're having a conversation in the first place. So we work so hard to build rapport and to build trust right out of the gate with a suspect or a subject, whether it's a victim or a witness. But so often, unfortunately, we forget that building rapport at the beginning is not where it ends. It ends at the end of the conversation. So we need to work just as hard in maintaining that relationship and not projecting our opinions or our feelings onto that person when we start to get impatient or frustrated with the way in which the conversation's going. As soon as they feel like we are lying or we think they're lying to us, they start to shut down, right? They start to become defensive, and all it does is make it, for us, shooting ourselves in the foot, because it makes it very difficult to actually get that information that we went in there seeking in the first place. So that's our demeanor onto the subject. The second thing to think about that a lot of times, I think, myself included, we forget, is that other people, our peers and our direct reports, if you're in a supervisory position, they are watching. They pay attention to what we're doing, right? If you're in a role of responsibility, they are modeling and mirroring your behaviors and your actions. So if I'm telling my team that, hey, I'm really interested in making sure that they're keeping up with using appropriate question structure during an interview, I'm really adamant about them taking time to build, maintain, and facilitate rapport during the conversation. I'm making a big deal about maintaining patience and an empathetic approach. But then they watch me do an interview, and as soon as it gets difficult, I get agitated, I lose my patience, and I start asking terrible questions. So I need to make sure that I'm not only just saying these things, but I'm actually modeling the behavior I expect to see in the field. And with the hopes that my behavior doesn't just impact this one conversation. My behavior has a long-standing impact on how conversations are being conducted by others as well. So hopefully that is some helpful tip and feedback for you. That is all I have for you this morning. So enjoy your weekend. If you're in anywhere in the Midwest, bundle up or just don't go outside. But have an awesome weekend, and thanks for tuning in. See you soon.